Welcome to the start of Sprint 3 in our Android development class. Since it's the start of Sprint 3, I'm going to take a look at the Scrum board, and I noticed that we have successfully completed all of our stories for Sprint 1 and 2, so it's time to add some new stories. So let's add a new story where we say authenticate the user. Okay. And I'll add another new story where we're going to say upload images to the cloud. Let's say plant images. And then we'll add another story where we'll say show all specimens that the user saved. And then we'll add another one. We'll say explore Kotlin. So these are the different things that we're going to do in this sprint, depending on how much time we have left in the semester. Explore Kotlin is kind of an interesting one because it is a technical story where most of these other ones are features. So let's consider what we need to do to authenticate a user. We need to set up Firebase authentication. We need to choose our authentication providers. We may need to generate an SHA-1 fingerprint, depending on the authentication provider that we have. And then we need to, let's say, invoke authentication methods, and let's just say in our Android application. And then we'll say handle authentication callback and save. For upload plain images to the cloud, we're going to say set up Firebase cloud storage, create an upload task to upload the images, handle callback methods, and let's say create private user directories, which reminds me of a couple. We're going to need to say update the Firebase authentication rules for private directories. We're going to need to do something similar up here. Update Firebase authentication rules. Forgive me if I've misspelled those, not too worried about spelling right at the moment. Okay, so that should be a fairly good setup. We might want to do some demos or maybe test these things out, but nonetheless, that's a fairly good start for those stories. So for show all specimens the user has saved, we might need a new activity, or maybe not. We'll see how we want to do this one. We'll say implement RecyclerView, implement callback methods for RecyclerView, implement view holder, and we'll say implement any callbacks required, and we might say determine layout. We'll just say determine layout. Now for Kotlin, listen, this is an interesting one because it's a technical task. Kotlin is really taking off in Android programming to the point where it's typically, in interviews for Android development now, I typically see a lot of Kotlin questions. And people who use Kotlin tend to really like it. I've thought a lot about teaching this entire course in Kotlin, and at some point I might get to that. But I haven't done that yet for a couple reasons. One is, Android programming is brand new, and in our degree program, there's an assumption that you've been through computer programming 1 and 2 with Java. There's no assumption of prior learning in Kotlin. So we can get through a little bit more if we all have this common foundation of Java, or if we started with Kotlin where there might be a few people who are struggling because they haven't completely mastered the concepts of Java. A lot of this course is really cementing those concepts of Java as well. So even if you never do mobile programming, you get a really good handle on the Java programming language, which can be applied elsewhere. That's one reason I don't teach the whole class in Kotlin. The other reason is you can do a whole lot more in Kotlin with a whole lot less typing than required in Java. But to appreciate that, you kind of have to appreciate what the typing is required in Java. In other words, you kind of have to see it the hard way before you appreciate the easy way. So for that reason, I typically save Kotlin to the end of the semester and then redo almost the entire app, the source code of the app, in Kotlin, reuse the interfaces and things like that, but show the back end in Kotlin. So for this one, we're going to say start a new Kotlin project, and then we'll say copy, layout, and images. Since from old project, since those are not Kotlin based, the layout and the images, we can just copy those over and focus ourselves on Kotlin. So we'll say add Kotlin extensions. Okay. One of my favorite ones, create a DTO. In Kotlin, you can create a DTO in one line. It's amazing. Okay. Implement retrofit in Kotlin. That's a popular concept because we already know what retrofit is. Kotlin makes it even more powerful. Okay. Then we have our autocomplete text view with Kotlin. And then we'll say, guess what? Save objects to Firebase with Kotlin. And then we'll say, get notification when data changes. So that's a look at what we're going to look at for Sprint 3. Again, depending on how much time we have this semester, we'll likely get through a lot of the Firebase stuff. We might do an either or on the RecyclerView or Kotlin. So we'll see how time goes. But nonetheless, that's what we're going to look at this semester. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure you are as well. Thank you.